1975, Labrador coast. An archaeologist digging into an 18th-century Inuit midden at Okak Bay pulls out a bear skull, 200 years buried, worn at the molars. A biologist named Cox studies the wear pattern and delivers a conclusion that overturns half a century of Canadian mammalogy. It is a grizzly, small, female, full-grown, in sediment older than the country, 2,000 kilometers east of any accepted grizzly range. For decades, every Quebec grizzly report was dismissed as color-morph black bear, misremembering folklore. The skull did not care about consensus. It forced a question everyone had avoided: what killed them? The Okak skull was not the first crack. In 1910, a photograph had been taken east of the George River at an Inuit camp of another bear skull. It sat in the record for 65 years, filed under curiosity, because grizzlies did not live in Quebec. Every mammalogy textbook said so. Every range map ended at Manitoba. When the 1975 skull came out of that midden and Cox confirmed the identification, the pattern shifted from anomaly to case. 2 skulls. Fur trade ledgers documenting brown bear hunts along Ungava rivers between 1835 and 1865, sitting in archives nobody had bothered to read closely. Innu and Inuit oral histories describing a large yellow-brown bear called Matashu that walked the George, the Coxoak, the Kaniapiskau, and the Torngat Mountains. It was not one voice being wrong. It was every voice being ignored. The bear had been there, and the record had been sitting on library shelves the whole time. Cossawick does not use the word extinct lightly. In May 2012, Canada's Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife split the country's grizzly bears into 2 designatable units. The western population, covering British Columbia, Alberta, Yukon, Northwest Territories, mainland Nunavut, parts of northern Saskatchewan and northeast Manitoba, was assessed as special concern. Nearly 3 million square kilometers of range. Around 26,000 animals. The other unit was the Ungava population, northern Quebec and Labrador. Historical range along the forest-tundra ecotone, where black spruce gives way to lichen and the rivers cut north to Ungava Bay. Assessment: extinct. The reason for designation was written in one sentence. This large carnivore existed as a relict population on the Ungava Peninsula until the 20th century, has not been documented since at least 1948, and is unlikely to be replaced through natural dispersal. Read that sequence again. Canada officially recognized the eastern grizzly and officially buried it in the same document. Half a century between the last documented individual and the official confirmation that it had ever existed. There is a reason for that gap, and it is not conspiracy. It is the standard of physical evidence. A skull is a fact. A photograph of a skull is a fact. An Innu elder describing a yellow-brown bear along a river his grandfather hunted is a fact of a different kind, treated as folklore by a discipline that until recently discounted anything without a specimen in hand. The Ungava grizzly was rare, dispersed, and easy to shoot. Every animal killed reduced the sample of what future scientists could touch. The Innu practice of consuming, utilizing, or otherwise disposing of every part of a hunted animal meant bones rarely survived to become evidence. What survived was the story, and stories were what science treated as unverified, until the ground gave back a skull. Meanwhile, in the 21st century, sightings did not stop. Quebec residents, rural municipalities, trail cameras that caught something too briefly to be sure. Homeowners who reached for a phone when a bear the size of a small horse crossed the yard. Wildlife biologists field these calls every year. Some resolve as large cinnamon-phase black bears, the kind that flatter their own size on a slope with poor lighting and no fixed object for scale. Some resolve as unmistakably enormous black bears, up over 300 kilograms, which is what a well-fed male can reach in the eastern hardwood forests. And some do not resolve at all. No hair on a branch, no scat under a tree, no matched frame from a second camera, just a report, and a landscape very good at swallowing evidence before an officer can reach it. So, if the population is gone from the record and the animal was here once, the question in the title collapses into something more precise. What hunted them out? The word predator is misleading. The Ungava bear had no natural enemy in its habitat. What killed the population was not a predator at all. It was economics. Fur trade ledgers document brown bear hunts along the Ungava rivers between 1835 and 1865, decades in which every large mammal in eastern Canada was walking merchandise. Add a low starting density, because barren ground and boreal ecotone habitat does not carry many grizzlies per square kilometre. Add isolation from any Western breeding source. The arithmetic becomes brutal. A small population, thinly spread, methodically thinned. There does not need to be a mystery predator when the mechanism is a rifle and a market. By the early 20th century, sightings slowed. By the 1940s, they stopped. The 1948 record is the last. The animals that walked out of that decade did not walk back in. Which brings us to the paradox that makes the whole story worse. The habitat is still there. Northern Quebec's forest-tundra ecotone did not disappear. The George River still runs. The Torngat Mountains still stand. Caribou herds have collapsed and rebounded and collapsed again, but prey remains. Salmon still return. Berry crops still ripen. If you dropped a grizzly into that landscape today, it could feed itself. That is not the same as saying it could stay. Between the current western grizzly range and the Ungava Peninsula lie roughly 3,000 kilometers of geography that stopped working for large carnivores a long time ago. Highways cutting through Ontario, cities, railways, hunted out corridors, farmland where boreal forest used to be. A grizzly walking east from Manitoba is not walking through wilderness, it is walking through a slow-motion trap. And the arithmetic that killed the Ungava bear the first time, small numbers, high mortality, no mates, reasserts itself before a single dispersing animal completes the crossing. Grizzlies can recolonize. That has been documented. In the 1940s and 1950s, the biologist Banfield tracked barren ground grizzlies expanding their range just west of Hudson Bay into territory long occupied by armed hunting parties. The bears moved because a source population sat immediately adjacent to the empty ground. Bear meets bear. Bear breeds bear. Range fills. This is how large carnivores return to places they have been erased from. It happened with black bears in the Ozarks after Minnesota transplants in the 1950s and 1960s. It happened with gray wolves in the western Great Lakes as Minnesota's protected population pushed into Wisconsin and eventually the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It happens whenever the corridor between a source and a vacancy is short enough that dispersing animals still find each other. And grizzly biology makes that corridor even narrower than it looks. Male grizzlies disperse. Females almost never do. They stay close to the range where their mothers raised them, which means even if a solitary male walked east across 3,000 kilometers of highway and hunted out land, no female would ever meet him at the other end. The distance between the western grizzly population and northern Quebec is not short enough. 3,000 kilometers. Every road, every hunter, every fragment of cleared land between. That is what the strongest evidence actually proves. The Okak skull confirms that grizzlies lived in Quebec and Labrador. The 1910 George River photograph confirms it too. The fur trade ledgers confirm the pattern of decline. The 2012 extinct designation is a description of a broken chain, of a population that once existed and now, on paper, does not. A population is not a species, a skull is not a survivor. But eastern Canada is enormous, and the record of what walks through its northern forests is not a document written in real time. It is written after the fact, when something is confirmed or when it is not. The Ungava Peninsula alone covers more than 500,000 square kilometers. Most of it holds no camera, no researcher, and no reason for anyone to be looking. Return to Okak Bay. The skull sits in a drawer at the Provincial Museum in Newfoundland and Labrador, catalogued, small, worn at the molars. It has been out of the ground for 50 years. In that time, it has done more to change the map of Canadian mammalogy than any living bear in the country. It proved a population. It exposed a bias. It set the terms for a designation that came 37 years later. And it left the question of what comes next unanswered. Somewhere in the Western Range, a young male will disperse this year. Bears do that. Somewhere in Ontario, a highway is being resurfaced. Somewhere in northern Quebec, a river cuts through boreal forest that has not held a documented grizzly since Truman was president. The corridor is closed. The species survives. The population does not. What hunted the Ungava grizzly out of Quebec was not a mystery. And it was not a predator. It was a market, a rifle, a small starting number, and the geography of an entire continent between it and any hope of return. Biologists finally know. It took half a century, one skull, and a lot of arithmetic to arrive at the answer. Tonight, somewhere north of the St. Lawrence, wind moves across a ridge nobody has walked in months. What walks that ridge, the record does not yet say. The Okak skull, catalogued and drawer-bound, keeps its silence. The rest of the forest keeps its own.